to exactly present um, the value chain and the value system that I spoke briefly about last time. But another piece of this strategic puzzle, and that does not involve and is repugnant to Porter, is operational effectiveness. And that's something, it is something that's important that we know about. So what is operational effectiveness? And this is performing similar activities, activities better than competitors. And that sounds a lot like Porter, because he says what you want to do is different things or do things differently. Performing different activities better than competitors always leads to superior quality and lower cost, but it's not strategy. All companies have to become operationally effective, and that's some of the tools that you have in the game. You can do employee training, you can do benchmarking, and I think there's one other thing that you can do to improve your operations. Can anyone remember what that is? Well, it's not going to do you much good if you don't know that that tool's there. So that's something to look up and see what you can do in terms of training or benchmarking. And as I said, there's one other technique to improve your operations. Because this is a game, the game here is to reduce your costs and increase your value. And that's what Porter always talks about. And part of reducing your costs is to be operationally effective. So there's 3 tools for being operationally effective, and they are best practices. Do you have that facility in the game?
Yeah, it's one in corporate citizenship. I think you can introduce that as a win.
Okay, and another part very similar to it is benchmarking, and I know you've got that.
I'm trying to find it. I know the best practices is under compensation and training, and you can select that.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't see benchmarking anywhere.
Okay, well, keep looking, because there is one other thing in there that's available to you. But best practices is this: observe what the other guys are doing, study how they do it, and match and improve upon their performance. This is a standard industry practice, and Porter says it ain't going to get you to the goalpost, through the goalpost. Second thing is benchmarking, and here you determine the rate of performance of competitors and seek to match or improve upon it. Now notice that both of those two are competing to be the best, because you're trying to copy. And that's perfectly fine, but that's not, that is not strategy. Or it is, if it is strategy, it's strategy to be the best. And strategy to be the best always is a zero-sum game. The third tool that you have available is outsourcing. And this is going to super efficient large suppliers. So let's take a look at each of these 3. Incidentally, that little man there is a cobbler at his workbench. So that's why I use that particular thing. Best practices. Continuously improves cost, quality, service, and innovation. You got to do it, but it's not your strategy. It has an important idea of flattening management. And some of you, if you ever talk with your grandparents, possibly your parents as well, would tell you that back in the 1970s, a lot of middle managers got laid off from their jobs. And that was because industry was beginning to flatten management organizations. And they were able to do that because of better information technology. And this is going on even now. And this is where you see from time to time, a large company laying off 40 or 50,000 people. What they're doing is trying to squeeze out these layers of management. Now, is this possible? Well, the Catholic Church is run by 4 layers of management. There's the Pope, the cardinals, the bishops, and the local priests, and they manage over 1 billion people. By contrast, General Motors has 17 layers of management. And normally a person stays in a layer of management for about 3 years before getting promoted. So it's going to take you 54 years to get to the top if you can tolerate that environment for that long. But the objective is to get fewer and fewer layers, and we can do this effectively because of improved best practice using computer technology. The other thing that it does, is part of the same thing, is reduces barriers between departments. And those barriers between departments are called silos. So I got a thing over here with some silos. And what happens is within a company, you'll find that people are so protective of their turf that they will, at the risk of hurting the company, keep certain things secret or not pass on opportunities to people in other departments for fear of having that other person gain a promotion advantage over them. And this is quite common, and it's unfortunate because that's not how we're supposed to operate. But what you find with best practices and with the use of better technology is that you have a better communication between departments, and you can reduce costs and get advantage of better techniques. Finally, best practices creates closer relationships with customers and suppliers. When I was with IBM in 1966, which was just really the beginning of the really big use of computers, data processing equipment, the biggest account that they had in the office where I worked was Procter & Gamble. I was in Cincinnati, and that's their home headquarters. And they actually had, the IBM people had an office in the Procter & Gamble headquarters building where they kept 7 people. And the 3 of those, I think, were salespeople, and the other 4 were systems engineers. And their total job was to make sure that Procter & Gamble was happy in all respects, that they were looking for additional opportunities to sell more product, and that they were taking care that everything that was being done was being done effectively. That was kind of an outlier at that time for a company to be doing that. But today, large companies are getting really close together, physically putting their properties on the same parking lot so that they can get better and better service and more effective buying on the part of the supplier and the buyer. And this often means, just as they did at Procter & Gamble, that you will have somebody from the supplier company in the customer's location, wandering around with complete ability to move through the company to be effective in servicing them, and that the buyer may well put one of their personnel in the seller's operation so that they can take advantage of moving product faster if they need to shorten the supply lines, or that they can get better service for special needs that they have. So that's best practices. And then part and parcel of this, the last item there says intelligent uses of IT, information technology. And that's what really drives all of these, the preceding 4 items. So, well, how do you do benchmarking? Well, you'd have to determine what you need to improve. And this is reducing the cost of the activities that you're involved in. And then find an organization that's exceptional, and again, copy them, study and copy their practices. Now this, again, just makes everybody else all the more alike, and ultimately ends up because everyone ends up being alike, it get down to where the only benefit, the only uniqueness you've got is a lower price, and that's horrible to be in that position.
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
I have an entrepreneurship class,
yeah.
and they're trying to push this blue ocean strategy. But the more I read it, the more it sounds like Porter ideas. So what exactly like are they trying to push? Like, have you heard about the blue ocean strategy?
Well, there's first of all, AJ, what you can do is you can look out on those videos that I've got that I put out there about the game.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe you'll find I think I take you through 10 of those for the game, and there's 2 more about blue ocean strategy, and they're quite good, and it's about maybe 20 minutes worth. And so if you'll look at that tonight, see if it's out there. If it isn't, just text me and I'll send you what I think is a very good presentation on that.
Yeah, because the more I read it, the more it's basically just Porter's concept, right? It's basically be different, try to create your own thing.
Porter, they are at each other's throat. The people that started Blue Ocean and Porter. Porter talks about getting being different in your market area, being unique in your market area. But the people with Blue Ocean say, yeah, but you're only looking at the existing market as the market you're competing in. No matter what you do, Porter, you're still looking to try and take away sales from one of the other competitors in that industry. By contrast, what the Blue Ocean people say is, if you can do it the right way, you can find a way to be sufficiently different. You can go after non-consumers. Remember, that was one of the words I told you at the very beginning of the course. It's
right, which is people that don't usually will buy your product, but then you make them buy your product in a way.
Well, what you do is you show them, hey, there's a way to solve this. As I told you the last time, I said a lot of times people were perfectly satisfied with their supplier, but the suppliers, because of this price competition and the operational effectiveness trying to be the very best, they ended up having to take out features and benefits that some customers like. And then when people have to do workarounds, or that is, they got to find another way to solve the problem, or where they have to use, they have to pay extra for stuff they don't need, it makes them an unhappy customer. And what the Blue Ocean people do is show I think a pretty interesting way to address that that dilemma. Who you studying with in entrepreneurship? AJ?
I think it's Professor Mullen. Let me get her name real quick.
Oh, is that Tu Brown?
No, I think her name is Anna Long Ruboyanis.
I don't know. I don't know that. Don't know that name. We will do a classroom exercise on Blue Ocean
Okay.
pretty soon. But if you get those 2 videos, I think you'll catch the essence of what I want to show you.
Okay, I'll look for them.
And so again, if you can't find them out there, send me a text message and I'll send them to you directly. Okay.
Sounds great.
All right. And AJ, I really like the fact that you're involved in the conversation, and I encourage everyone else to do that so that I can give them marks for getting a better grade. And that's what everyone wants. So with outsourcing, what you're doing is you're not sending jobs overseas. And in fact, we're seeing that beginning to reverse now. The purpose for the overseas was to get cheaper labor rates. That's ultimately what it was. But there's a lot of problems with dealing in the overseas market, and there were in the initial periods of dealing specifically with China, because that's the big area where we had done a lot of outsourcing. Although we've done it previously with Japan. And the problem is that not everybody's speaking English. And therefore you get it takes a lot of time to work out the language differences. Secondly, a lot of times we make assumptions about what qualities are needed in a product, and the Chinese do it the least expensive way they can, and they miss a lot of the things that ultimately the American user is going to need. And so it takes a while to work out all those kinks. I had back in 1975, 76, had a customer that he was making hand tools like a monkey wrench was one of the products that they had, and they were having heavy competition from overseas. But it turned out that the people overseas didn't realize how strong the steel had to be that was used in the monkey wrench. And as people would actually put some torque on that, it would break the unit. So it took time for them to figure out how to do it. And in the process, one of the things that happened is some of those labor rates have gone up, and now China is not as competitive. And a lot of the manufacturing has moved out of China and gone on to places like India, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam. What you're looking for, though, is more efficient suppliers, and that may mean an American supplier. Now, if you look at the big heavy industry back from the last century, in the automobile industry, for example, there was the River Rouge plant of Ford, where they would drop coal and iron ore at one end of this facility, and a car would drive out of the other end of it. They did everything in-house. But they also did some buying from outside suppliers for things like spark plugs or transmissions. General Motors for years had Bodies by Fisher, and that was the Fisher brothers that were providing the platform that the car was built on. It was not fully owned anyhow by General Motors. What was assumed is that you could get the ultimate efficiencies of scale within your own system. And it turns out that in a lot of cases, an even bigger supplier of spark plugs, they don't use that many spark plugs anymore, but transmissions and air brakes, and well, in this case, it'd be one of those ABS brakes. They can get people that can do it even cheaper than the big three. And this is true in computers. There's probably 2 or 3 companies that make power supplies for all of the desktop computers. There's somebody else that makes all the buses for that. There's someone else that does motherboards more effectively, so that you end up with everybody buying from the same people. These are the super efficient suppliers, and that means everyone ends up with exactly the same costs. Now, Michael Porter weighs in on another aspect of this, and what I'm going to show you is actually something that Porter talks about, but that Clayton Christensen develops at a greater way than even Porter. He says that outsourcing, Porter begins with the premise that outsourcing may seem innocuous, but it can lead to a loss of a core competency. So a core competency is something that you do very well. And that's the thing that you've got to keep in-house, that special competency. There's also a thing called distinctive competency, and that's something that you've got to keep in-house no matter how much it costs you. So the core competency is something that you do very well. And the example that both Porter and Christensen give is Dell and Asus. And Asus came to Dell and they said that they could do chips for Dell for 25% less than it was currently costing Dell. And that sounded like a pretty good deal. And so they did it. Now, the last case study that you've got is Dell's cash flow. It's a cash flow case on Dell. And Dell was growing so rapidly that they were not really able to finance all their growth. And so this was an opportunity to buy chips cheaper, but also to reduce that is Dell's investment in manufacturing capacity for chips. So they went ahead with that. Well, when they were successful with that, Asus came back and they said, why don't you let us put those chips in the motherboard? And that's a process for assembling the computer. And we'll save you 25% on that. And so they did that. Dell said, sure, go ahead and do that for us and we'll pay you for that. Then they came back and they said, how about doing the cases? We can actually assemble this for you. And, we'll put it all together and put it in the case for you. Yes?
No, I think your mic is just open.
Okay. All right. So they did this with the case. And then they said, well, why don't we package it for us? All you have to do is put a label on it when it gets to Austin. And so they went along with that. And then Asus didn't come back again. Instead, as I will tell you, but you can't see, they went to Best Buy and said, look, we can offer you an Asus computer. And effectively what Dell had done was to give away all of their trade secrets. Now, I'm going to skip this because it's a repeat of the same thing from Clay Christensen. Operational effectiveness is not strategy. It focuses on improvement, but the long-term effect, and this is important, the long-term effect is everyone has the same results. The customer and the suppliers benefit, but not the company that is working to get to be super efficient. So we looked at another way. Operational effectiveness is competition to be the best, but your job is to make money. And strategy is about maximizing returns by being different, which you'll see with the blue ocean, AJ. So we've got to pursue, it's important, we have to pursue operational effectiveness to be competitive. And this is like the ante at the table in Las Vegas. You gotta pay your dues just to stay in the market. And that may be all that it allows you to do. The ultimate benefit of being operationally efficient is you get to stay in the game, but the real winners are the suppliers and the customers. But strategy is different. Operational effectiveness is doing the same things as the competitor, but doing it more efficiently. Strategy always is about doing different things and doing things in a different way. The CEO has to focus on his strategy. And why does he have to do that? Because it's easy to get worn out and you just don't have the will to stick with it. It's too easy to surrender to the siren song of growth for growth's sake. And you may end up just focusing on improvements without understanding how they affect the overall strategy. And finally, it's easy for presidents of companies to get distracted. And this is called the shiny penny syndrome.